So, as of today at approximately noon, I decided that I will no longer be bounded by the shackles that is The Secret History by Donald Tartt, and that I must finish this book immediately. This has been such an interesting reading experience. We are officially on day 15 of reading this 600-page book about very morally corrupt people who do very morally corrupt things. Okay, how this book basically works is that it's separated into two books, within the book 1 and book 2. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you the plot because this book is not new. So book 1 focuses on our main character, Richard Penn. And initially when I was reading this, I thought he was going out to this college in Vermont for grad school. But I'm pretty sure he's here for undergrad, but that's neither here nor there. So we follow our character, Richard, from California to this, I'm imagining, it's a very uppity, secluded school in Vermont where he tries to get into, the Greek division of studies because it's very small, it's very secluded. So once he's there, he meets the other, I think it's 5 students who are in this class, 5 or 6. Let me see if I can remember. There's Charles and Camilla, the twins, and then there's Francis, Henry, and Bunny. So yeah, there's a group of 5 before he gets there. All 4 of them, except for Camilla, are men. We follow him up to that point. And then, that first part, it just kind of is about him being integrated into their lives a bit. They feel very secret society-esque, but I don't know. At least while I was reading, I never got the vibe that they were doing anything other than being rich kids from New England. But turns out that's not true. They're trying to, at the leadership of Henry, who, to me in book 2, his character kind of transforms. I made a note about it. But under the guidance of Henry, are trying to conduct some type of ritual that essentially is trying to bring them to the Greek version of Nirvana or something. I don't know. That's the best way I can describe it. And they go into the woods and they act stupid. And they act stupid to try to achieve this. And they do. And when they finally do, they kill this farmer. Are we following? California boy moves to New England, tries to get into this elusive academic group at said New England college full of rich kids. Rich kids do rich white kid things. Okay. Now rich white kids have killed a man, and instead of doing anything moral, and admitting to it, they cover it up. So that's where only 4 of them participate in the killing of this man. Bunny knows that they're doing this crazy Greek Nirvana activity thing, whatever. He knows, but they eventually cut him out of it for reasons I don't exactly remember. But when you read this book, Bunny is not, he's in this group of them, but he's not one of them. Whereas our character that comes in from California, he's an outsider, but he's more like them than Bunny is, if that makes sense. So Bunny kind of gets cut out of doing this, but he finds out about the murder, and he eventually kind of starts to use it to extort them to get trips to Rome and new clothes and fancy food and all this stuff using their money. He keeps saying he's going to go to the police, but he never does. But they think that this will be an issue for them, so they kill Bunny. And that's where book 1 ends. Book 2, which is where I now am. This morning, I was about 50% of the way through, and now I'm at chapter 7, and I'm 67% of the way through, so I'm almost there. We are now at the point where we are dealing with essentially 2 main plot lines. One, the emotional fallout from what happened and kind of this group's general paranoia and some steps they go to cover their tracks. But then also there are other things that are just left as loose ends, that in all their meticulous planning about killing Bunny, they don't remember, like, there is kind of sort of this thing where he was extorting them for their money, which could go back to them as a reason as to why they would want him gone. So that was really smart of them. Good job, geniuses. We're essentially dealing with the emotional fallout and their paranoia versus the ongoing police investigation. And where I am now, they just found the body. Honestly, I was kind of hoping that, well, not hoping, but I think it would have been interesting if he didn't die. But at the same time, I kind of knew he did, because the thing that drew the search out for him so long is the fact that where they're staying in Vermont got like this freak mid-April snowstorm. So his body kind of got buried out in the woods under piles and piles and piles and piles of snow, which most likely destroyed any evidence that they were there, but slowed down the process of finding him. And they're kind of also in this weird spot between showing concern because he was their friend. Like I said, there was a group of 6 of them who studied Greek and they were always together. So for them to not be concerned about him not showing up to things for, a couple of days would have seemed suspicious, but also trying not to seem too over involved in things, because if you've watched Criminal Minds before, like I have, sometimes that unsub likes to insert themselves into the investigation. I'm determined to finish this book today. I'm doing my snack break now, but after that, I'm diving back in. Chapter 7 is from page 376 to 420. So we should just be able to breeze through that, and then hopefully we'll be able to get to our epilogue, which happens sometimes after chapter 8 on page 538. I am disappointed. Why am I disappointed, you might ask? Well, up until 90 minutes ago, I was cruising pretty strong with this book, We were moving forward, let me try again. The plot and everything was moving forward. The characters were interesting. And, even though on surface level, compared to books I read, I should have been bored, I wasn't bored, so I was enjoying it. Then I figured out while I was reading this chapter, I just finished chapter 7. I'm now on the last chapter. I'm 76% of the way done. I realized that they killed the only interesting person in this book. Bunny was the only interesting character in this book. And Bunny, he was despicable, but at least he was interesting. Oh my gosh, I feel like this is Gossip Girl all over again. Yes, some of those characters were despicable, but at least Blair Waldorf was interesting. No one else in this book is interesting, so I just spent the last chapter, 100 pages or so, being bored. Chapter 7 encompasses, right after they find the body, so there's no more investigation, no more any of that, and they're all going to Bunny's family's home for the funeral, and that's all that chapter is. It is going to their house for the funeral and having the funeral, and it was so boring. I don't know what's going to happen for the last 25, technically 24% or so of this book for chapter 8, but I'm so upset, because before it was interesting. Now everyone's just miserable, and it's not as fun for me. The writing is still intact, and the pace of it comes back sometime, which is what I think was saving me in the first place, was the pace. But now that the pace is slower and you're just going through these very everyday mundane events, even though they still killed someone, but the events have now become very mundane, it's just where's the fun, guys? Where's the move? Let's move this along. Where's the plot? And that's just where I'm stuck right now. So now I'm bored because these characters are making me mad, except Camille. Camille's cool, but the rest of these dudes, they need to get a life or something. I don't know. So anyway, I will be accomplishing my goal today of finishing this book, which makes me happy. It only took 2 weeks, but I have one more chapter to finish, but I'm not doing that now. I'm going to do some other things, and then I'm going to come back. I'm going to finish it before the football game tonight. But yeah, I'm upset now. Ugh. Can't have anything nice nowadays. Greetings from post-game. The Bears won, and I'm also almost out of the secret history purgatory. I only have 11 pages until the end of this chapter, and then the epilogue, and then I'm done. We did it. Well, first of all, the Bears won. So you got a rough day after. Bears won. And I finished the secret history. Finally. It took me 15 days. 15 days to read it. Let's look at my reading log, because occasionally I remember to track my percentages, and I did this time like every couple of days. So I started reading it on September 29th, and then from September 29th to the 30th, I read 2% of the book. And then from the 30th to the 6th, I read an additional 8%. So now we're 10% of the way through. Between the 6th and the 8th, I read another 9%, sitting at 19%. Then from the 8th to the 11th, I got to 31%, which means I read an additional 13% of the book. And then yesterday, when I decided to lock in, that morning, I logged that I had read between the 10th and the 13th. I'd read up to 54% of the way through, so an additional 23%. And then yesterday, I finished off the remaining 46%, finishing at around 11:30 last night. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that I'm finally done. The last kind of thing that I remember saying was the fact that I was reading chapter 7 and I was bored. And that made me sad because so far the rest of the book, the events and the pacing had kept me interesting, even though, and this is definitely like the third time I've said this before, but this is not usually a genre or like a type of book that I enjoy. I enjoy fast-paced events, but I enjoy reading about things that cannot happen on Earth, generally, I'd say. Like some type of fantastical element, but this is all like extremely realistic. The most unrealistic part of this is like the fact that there's a college cohort, undergraduate of 5 kids studying Greek. That's the most unrealistic part of this book. Everything else could 100% happen. So with that in mind, the events and the pacing were good for me. But chapter 7 really slowed it down a lot. And I feel like that was intentional because come chapter 8, we were locked and loaded with things that need to happen in the last about 100 pages of this book. So chapter 7 gave you that slower emotional, like, it wasn't an emotional break because there were a lot of emotions going through, but it slowed down the plot of the story a lot. That chapter pretty much exclusively, from my memory, took place surrounding Bunny's funeral, and almost entirely took place like in his home with his family and then at his funeral. So those only 2 settings, and everyone was just kind of trapped in those 2 places for that entire chapter. So there wasn't a lot of moving of events. There was just small things continuously happening, which is what made it kind of boring for me. But then chapter 8, we're back on campus and we are locked and loaded. So yeah, sure, we'll call all these spoilers, but in chapter 8, we find out that their Greek professor, we find out that Bunny put a letter in their Greek professor's mailbox on letterhead from the hotel that him and Henry stayed at in Rome. Meaning, because initially the professor thinks it's like a dupe or something, but because of that letterhead, it could have only came from Bunny because only 2 people would have had access to that specific kind of paper. So that's what makes it legit. So the professor finds this letter and he shows it to Francis and Richard, or Charles and Richard. I can't remember which one of those 2 were there. But they show it and then they kind of all freak out. And the professor actually sees the letterhead that's on. He knows that it's from Bunny, and then he just gives it to them. And then he leaves, books it out of town. So now, academically, which is one major part of this book, all of our characters are kind of just in limbo. They don't know what's going to happen with their coursework. They don't know what's going to happen with their major. They don't know if they're going to be able to finish the semester. They don't know if their credits are going to transfer. Most of them have gone like so off track with their coursework in the first place that even trying to transfer to another institution, they'd be out of it, especially for Richard. He's kind of the only one that comes from the working class background. He'd be out of it for scholarships and things of that nature. So it puts everything really up in the air. So that's two things that happen in this chapter. Additionally, we have this whole breakdown that happens with Charles, where he gets sick and he has to go to hospital, and Francis and Richard spend a lot of time trying to take care of him. But then we also find out that Camilla has moved out of the apartment with her twin, and I'm just going to call this the revelation about the twins. Well, actually, there's two revelations. One I'll say, the other one I'm just going to float into the universe. Okay, so the revelation about the twins is the one I'm just allowing to float out into the universe, because my actual reaction when I read that part of the book was mouth open, eyes wide, and then just, ew. Sweet home Alabama. Okay, now we're all caught up. Great. The second thing that we find out is that Charles apparently enjoys hitting his sister. So Camilla moved out. Also, what I said about Camilla being like the only normal person or like not shitty person in this book, retracted. Yes, her brother being a piece of crap is bad, but also revelation about the twins, girl. So yeah, I redact that part. Retracted, redacted, never said. So yeah, there's also that part. And then I'm probably missing things, but these are just what I remember. And then we kind of have, there's this instance, they take Charles to Francis's country house to kind of heal up and get better. Because I believe in the book, it said that he has like bronchitis or some type of lung infection. He's also like actually an alcoholic and going through all of that. So they take him to Francis's country house to try to recover. And then he jailbreaks. And what ends up happening is they all end up in the hotel room that Camilla is staying in. And Charles shows up and he wants to kill Henry, because Charles does ask one important question towards the end of this book, which is, why did we listen to you? He kind of comes to this realization that I came to at the same time as he was saying all of this, is why did we always listen to Henry? We always listen to what he said, and look at where that got us. Like, how did he do that? How did he always make us listen to him? Why did we never question him? So he kind of believes that all of this is Henry's fault. So he shows up at the hotel room that Camilla's staying in to kill him. And in the scramble, and there's a gun and stuff, Richard gets shot. He lives. And somebody else gets shot? No. Richard gets shot on accident and lives. And this makes the innkeeper and his wife like come up to see what's going on in the room. One shot goes to the window, one shot goes into Richard. And then when they come in, Henry just into the head. Like that line from Chicago, I fired 2 warning shots into his head. Yeah, that's what happens. Except he did it to himself. So that's what happens to Henry. And again, I was kind of shocked. But at the same time, Henry has like this whole monologue about how much power he felt after killing Bunny. And he was like, I know you feel it too. He's talking to Richard. I know you feel it too, and all of this. So to me, I feel like with his particular ending, he felt like he was out of control, that he was losing control of all of the elements that he thought he had carefully plotted out, when in reality he didn't. And so for him, the only way to go out both in control and with a good reputation was to end it the way he did. That is my thoughts on that. And then that's literally like that happens. And then there's a little bit more about how he survived for 12 hours and how Richard got out of his French finals because of the very good excuse of having, a bullet hole in his stomach. And yeah, then we're in the epilogue. And the epilogue was used well. It serves as a closing about basically every character that has a name in this book. So you find out what happens to Judy, Sophia, Cloak is what I've been calling him, along with a couple other characters. You kind of find out what happens to them, where they end up. You find out where everyone in like our main squad who's still living ends up. Oh gosh. Camilla is taking care of her grandmother. Charles is somewhere in Galveston, Texas with a married woman. Broke, but apparently happy. Richard graduated with a degree in English literature, moved back to California with his girlfriend at the time, who was Sophie, even though he didn't want to. He did not want to go back to the West Coast. And then they broke up 6 months later, but he's studying literature out there. I think he's getting a master's. Who did I say? Henry's dead. Francis, whose ending made me the most upset because he's closeted like the entire time. And then his grandfather finds out and he's forced to marry a woman. And then he kind of writes like a final note to Richard and Camilla, and then he ends up in a hospital for reasons that we're connecting the dots about. So Francis's ending made me the most upset, even though he is still a horrible person for all the things that happened in the 538 pages prior to this moment. But his ending made me the most upset. Bunny's dead. So yeah, that two of them end up dead. One person wanted to join them but did not succeed. Charles is disintegrating. So now we're just going to cut quickly to my overall thoughts about the book. Let's see. Okay. Something I want to note is that within the Secret History, there's 2 books, book 1 and book 2. And the biggest difference between book 1 and book 2 for me is Bunny being alive and Bunny being dead. And not in the sense of like the fallout from it in the second part, but just his character took up so much space in the first book that like it seemed so empty afterward. But I also feel like that emptiness gives you a chance to dive deeper into some of the other characters in book 2. And Henry's character in particular to me comes out in that book like way stronger. And I feel like on a reread, you would definitely pick up on some of his more nefarious character traits earlier on. But like with Bunny being gone in book 2, Henry stands out a lot more. And I also think that could be intentional. I feel like a lot of other storylines and a lot of other problems get illuminated more in book 2 than they were in book 1, and that is intentional because what I just said, Bunny's character was meant to take up a lot of space and a lot of pages and a lot of time, but with him gone, it's kind of pulling back a mask on a bunch of other things. This is just my final thought, which is for me, I do, like in my apps or on my thing, like I rate things with stars, but at the same time, I'm kind of always like, To me, I kind of have a very basic of, did I like the book? Yes or no? And then sometimes there's like, yes, but a caveat. So did I like this book? Yes, I like this book. Caveat is chapter 7 bored me out of my mind. But would I read it again? Yes. But I would want a physical copy, I think. I also have always seen the physical copies of this book, and I never actually picked one up. So when I was imagining it, hang on, I'm going to get one. Literally before I got the book myself, and I saw it, my bookstore, my Barnes & Nobles, always stocks them facing forward, like this. So when I saw it facing forward, I had no idea how long it was. I thought The Secret History was this long. In reality, it's a 600-page book. So the next time I go to a bookstore, I'm going to pick one up and see how actually dense it is and how the physical copy page count compares to the page count that I got on Kindle, because I know formatting and stuff can change things up. But I was not expecting this book to be this long. Air conditioning. I was not expecting this book to be this long, but I'm glad I read it. I would read it again. Me and chapter 7, I'm going to have to find a way to appreciate it. But I'm done. I'm free. The next book that I plan on reading is The Sound of Waves, and I'm really excited. And then I'm going to read Fahrenheit 51, and I'm going to take my Kindle off airplane mode so that way I can get my new unsuspend some of my library holds and get some new books in. But yeah, I'm finally done. I'm finally done.